Chapter 31. Although Ashley brought us in downwind of the hogs, I suspected they'd heard our whispers when their snuffling nostrils went still and low rumbles vibrated their bellies. Although my first inclination was to take a mental moment in preparation, the pixie zipped into the small clearing, her glow swelling to full wattage as she gave off sparkles streaming to either side. Both hogs turned to follow as she darted around the far side of the open meadow. Shoulders tensed, I disabled system messages so they wouldn't distract me. Then I burst from cover when Ashley led them in a circle to bring them around. Your concealment skill has reached rank 5. Visions of a grand tackle filled my mind as I launched into the air, both arms spread for a linebacker tackle. But my target probably outweighed my real-world form by 100 pounds. As a halfling, it twisted, threw its ass end around, then tossed me before I could even think about reaching under its neck with my knife. Shit. I rolled so it wouldn't trample me, which brought me right into the path of the second hog. Rolling back in the direction from which I'd come, I evaded the thundering cloven hooves bearing down. I thrust my blade-wielding fist out and punctured its thick skin when it passed. Although I'd gotten lucky in that the knife penetrated one side of its soft underbelly, I found myself being dragged across the meadow as I gripped the knife with my second hand and held on for dear life. The dragging of cold steel through its belly stopped when the blade snagged on the hog's lowest rib. It gave an ear-shattering squeal, then entrails began to slide from the hole to splatter to the ground as it thrashed. It gave a final desperate snap toward my arm. Your blade's skill has reached rank 5. Luckily, it was a fat fuck, and I was out of reach. When it dropped onto its side, the blade tore free. Its cloven feet kicked desperately at the air like it was still trying to run, but the alert of its desperate squeal brought the attention of its packmate. Do hogs run in packs? The first came at me with utterly gigantic tusks. I rolled through the gore, then scrambled away, but not before one bony point caught me in the side of the thigh. I yelped. God damn it. The first hog died. I was alerted by numerals and letter flashing gold, then fading to green as they rose skyward. Plus 85 XP. Its friend came squealing around to lunge at me again, bristly little tail lashing. I only had eyes for its tusks gnashing to and fro as it raced toward me. Crouched and wielding my bloody knife in one hand and Tansy's jawbreakers in the other, I waited until the last possible moment before I threw myself to the left so it rushed past. My offhand came around to catch the thick bastard in one ear. The knuckles flashed upon impact. Critical hit! Your knuckles skill has reached rank 2. I'd never have expected such a bulky creature to stop on a dime, but it did. When it whipped around, it teetered and almost lost its footing. But I lunged with my knife before it could recover. This time, I followed the rule of hand-to-hand combat with a blade. Slash, don't stab. For my effort, I left a pathetic groove down its back, the blood just rising to the surface to fill the gap. At that rate, I'd be at it all night, assuming it didn't gouge me and send me back to the starter slum. Ren! Ashley called out, her small voice ringing out over the tramping of our opponents. I spun clumsily on my wounded leg to spy another hog bursting from the bushes and darting toward me. Pinned from both sides, I drew a deep breath. While whipping my head back and forth, I tried to gauge which threat would arrive first. When it proved to be the one charging from the bushes, I took 2 lunging steps toward it, leaped skyward, then brought my knee slamming into its skull, right between the eyes. We both tumbled from the impact, but I was back on my feet after my roll to one side came to an abrupt halt. Although the shoulder I'd impacted upon landing protested, I gritted my teeth, lunged once more, then slammed the knife into the new arrival's ear until it wouldn't go any deeper. When I twisted the blade for good measure, the hog collapsed to the ground. Then it shuddered as it was overtaken with death tremors. When in doubt, go for the brain. Plus 90 XP. My head came around just in time to glimpse the first hog bearing down. I had to heave the knife loose. Bones squeaked when it slid free, but I knew I was too late. The hog lunged. As I raised my hands to defend my face, a bright glowing pixie zipped between us to pass inches from the hog's snout. The hog screeched to a halt, its hooves cutting gashes in the soft ground. It snapped at Ashley in vain. To capitalize, I brought both hands down in a violent combination, The knife plowed into the hog's back, then I brought my fist around to clock it in the side of its hard head. No flash this time, no critical hit. But the hog's head lolled. A moment later, it shook furiously to clear the cobwebs. I left the knife deposited when it had penetrated. Your blade skill has reached rank 6. My right hand came around in a pointless hook that glanced off the beast's cheek just beneath one eye, but I followed up with the knuckles again. Bone cracked. A split opened above the other eye. Blood poured from the wound. Red text rose. Partial blindness attack down. I threw myself onto its back, yanked my blade free, then slammed it into the hog's throat. The beast screamed, then gurgled, wide eyes ringed white as its crimson life force sprayed from the vital wound. My leg did not appreciate the exercise, but I got another point of stamina for my trouble. I guessed it was a fair trade. Both arms wrapped under its chin, I pulled up with all my might as I rode its back to the ground. The wound gaped, and more blood poured forth. That fucker took forever to bleed out and die. By the end, we were all covered in blood and mud and bloody mud. Plus 94 XP congratulations. You have reached level 5. You have unlocked the auction house system in Mafioso Online. Auction consoles located throughout River City and the rest of the world are now visible to you. Buy, sell, trade. You've unlocked a fundamental tool for character growth in Mafioso Online. Focus here to commence the rolling of your attribute dice. I collapsed by the bushes we'd hidden ourselves in and pressed my palm over a gash in my leg. The increased healing rate enjoyed by leveling wasn't maintaining pace with losses from the open wound, probably because of the seriousness of the gouge. Bandages would have been nice, but I wrapped my shirt around it like I'd treated my arm earlier. Maybe if I just held it tight for a few minutes, the bleeding would stop, and the healing mechanic would kick in faster. What the hell did I know? To distract myself from the pain, I focused on the indicated spot in my HUD. The 6-sided die rolled, but my attention waned when the pixie's vibrant glow zoomed close. Ashley landed on my leg, peering at the bloody hand I pressed to the tear in my pants and thigh. "Move your hand." She made a shooing motion. "Dipshit. You have a healer." I did as she asked, turning a little onto my side so the wound faced up. She clutched her hips and leaned in like she was examining the injury by the glow she emitted. Then she shook one wing over the gash so the glittery dust drifted down to cover it. She doubled over to smooth and pat the glitter down with the measured, steady movements of her palms. My health bar's decline halted, then began to tick in the opposite direction. A numbness swept over my leg. Ashley Rainsong uses pixie dust on your wound. Plus 1 HP, plus 4 HP, plus 7 HP. A warm, tingling sensation crept up and down my leg. A moment later, I couldn't feel the limb at all. Despite myself, I grinned. "Damn, girl!" No wonder players logged in to snort pixie dust. I couldn't imagine what the numbing sensation creeping across my lower body would feel like in my brain. I recalled the image of the blood talons I'd taken revenge upon as they went starry-eyed at the warehouse with new understanding. Which is every reason you should avoid the shit. Get your head in the game. When I shook the healed leg, sensation returned. Despite the pleasant numbness and the resulting disappointment that flooded my brain, I knew it was for the better, and I counted myself lucky I could shake it off. But that made sense. What kind of game has healing that would leave the player useless? If the pure product was so potent, Jinx must cut the drug with another substance somewhere in the supply chain. I wondered about the elf's occupation. Did the in-game drug trade help fuel Rossi's and Jaworski's money laundering efforts? "Thanks!" I raised my fist, smiling and hoping she'd understand my intent. I could see from her furrowed brow that she turned it over in her mind. But then she lifted her own tiny fist and bumped it against my knuckle. "You're welcome." She cocked her chin at each hog in turn. "Are these 3 enough meat for your friend?" I sighed, shaking my head. "I need one more to finish the quest. I've got one hung up back a ways to collect, too." A rustling on the far side of the clearing made the hair on my arms bristle, and I saw a pointed tan muzzle snuffle at the nearest hog carcass. I leapt to my feet and flew across the clearing, arms outstretched as I roared, "Oh no, you don't!" The coyote fled back into the undergrowth, and it belatedly occurred to me that I'd stupidly deprived myself of experience points. But then a bubble floated up into my field of view. Your intimidation skill has reached rank 7. Well, that was fucking stupid, I muttered as I trudged back to where Ashley waited. But at least I got a skill point. Intimidation could prove useful. Why stupid? It would have eaten your hog. Yeah, but I should have killed it for the experience. I'm trying to level up. She nodded her understanding. I see. Then you should be ready to hunt more, yes? Yeah, but I can't leave these carcasses strewn about. I gestured to the pigs. How far is it to the next feeding ground? There are nesting areas back that way, in from the logging road. She pointed. I brought up my map, then turned to face the direction she indicated. The triangular glow stretching from the dot representing me on the photorealistic output turned with my body to indicate which way I was looking. We should probably find a way to take these with us. If I keep hanging them around the forest, some beast capable of climbing is bound to show up. Ashley nodded. Yup, especially bears. Great. Bears. An idea came as I gazed upon my surroundings. Rubbery vines hung from one variety of tree. Fallen branches littered the ground beneath many. Your eyes dart around like you have an idea. Yeah, I said half-absently. I think this just might work. I hacked into 2 saplings with my dagger until they broke off in my hands, then whittled them down to similar lengths. Close enough for my purposes, anyway. My arm still ached with each effort, which brought my attention to the blood-soaked shirt I'd used on it and my leg. I raised the garment from the spot where I'd left it when Ashley healed me with the pixie dust, then pulled it on for what little protection it lent against the evening's chill. The fabric was stiff and disgusting, but it was all I had. My forearm didn't look too bad, but the pain had me taking a break to rub the purplish-brown bruise while I forced deep breaths into my lungs. Can I help? Ashley asked, fluttering around my head as I worked. Not unless you have some kind of travois-making magic. Her little face fell and she shook her head. If your arm is still hurting you, I could dust it. It works on bruises? I wiggled my once-injured leg to answer my own question, but Ashley responded anyway. Of course. That would definitely help, thank you. After pushing up my sleeve, I offered my arm. The pixie spread sparkles where my flesh once resembled raw meat, and the ache subsided to almost normalcy. My side still hurt, but I decided not to mention it. I wasn't sure how much dust she could spare, and it seemed selfish to ask for more, until I knew her better anyway. The 2 saplings formed the sides and poles I'd used to pull the contraption, and I was about to cut off all the branches until I realized they might help create the bed I needed. Partly, anyhow. I lashed some freshly cut crosspieces to the saplings with some of my twine where I needed more support, hoping it was sturdy enough to bear the weight I'd load it with. I got a surprising info bubble as I finished securing the bed. You have earned a new skill, carpentry. Saw planks and sand edges to build everything from weapon shafts to houses. Your carpentry skill is rank 1. The alert came in a side bubble, much like other skill-ups I'd squelched from the usual central area where I would have found them distracting. I hadn't thought much about crafting skills since Mafioso Online's welcome message my first minutes inside the game world. Something about a city rife with organized crime had my mind on other things, but I'd take every advantage I could get, and who knew how crafting skills might help. Fashioning weapons sounded promising, especially when considering the crappy blade I carried and the borrowed knuckles with only a 3% chance to kick off their special abilities. What did gamers call those rare effects? A proc? Yeah, something like that. I chopped the outer branches to leave room for gripping the makeshift stretcher. I stopped every once in a while to eye the corpses to ensure I didn't build it too narrow. With all 5 hogs I'd have to carry, it was going to be a slog. Your carpentry skill has reached rank 2. Last thing I needed was for them to bust through the bed on the way back, so I added some more support through the middle. Forethought equaled gains. Your carpentry skill has reached rank 3. The ends of the poles would drag the ground behind me, and it was better to make sure they were long enough to bear the size of the burden I planned to load onto it. I eyed the hogs I had nearby and sighed at the thought of what I was taking on. The poles would work as sort of a lever, but I'd have to work to get the load moving. What I wouldn't have given for some wheels, or a horse. Better, a horse and wagon. Now that would be a luxury. The contraption was huge compared to my diminutive self, but the sooner I stopped dreading the haul and got on with it, the sooner it'd be over. The quest didn't specify any organ meats, so I pulled those out of the hogs to lighten the load. I grimaced at the scent, then turned to find Ashley's nose wrinkling in disgusted agreement. Maybe she was a vegetarian. I heaved the carcasses onto the frame, then lashed them to it. The whole time, Ashley cheered me on. I was tired and impatient by then, and her childlike voice grated on my nerves a little. But I restrained myself from any mention of it, reverting to the sentiment that I needed every ally I could get. Instead, I wiped my bloody hands on my shirt, then the sweat from my face with the back of my forearm, not the glittery one, while I caught my breath again. Another bubble popped up. You have learned a new professional skill. Butchery. Used by cooks to prepare all varieties of meat dishes and soups, butchery is a great addition to cooking for anyone wanting to buff attributes and skills. Your butchery skill is rank 1. Nice, I guessed. I cleaned off the dagger before sliding it back into my belt. Then I plopped down and reached into my bag for another half sandwich. I snarfed a good chunk, then raised it. You want a bite? She sniffed and shook her head emphatically. No thanks, I don't eat flesh. Lucky guess. A piece of crust, then? I peeled some off and gave it to her. It didn't touch the meat. Holding the bread in both hands, she made short work of it. My mood improved with the cessation of my grumbling stomach. Hoisting the top ends of the poles proved a fast reminder to lift with my thighs and not my back, but I still had to lean into my leg muscles to raise the weight. My jaw protested as I ground my molars, then the contraption finally moved. Very slowly. I didn't bother turning to look back when the skittering patter of tiny feet announced the arrivals of scavengers having their way with the innards we'd left behind. The pixie had my back if any of them got cocky with the load I dragged. Eat up, buttercups. The way to the nesting area was slow going, even with the pixie guiding me around the tight or boggy spots. The travois poles dragged long divots behind us. If Javier Jinx re-emerged and decided to follow us, tracking us would be child's play. Sweat pouring down my face, I became convinced there was nothing great about dragging feral hogs around. But interface bubbles proved me wrong when I gained 2 brawn and 1 stamina rank-ups. I'd run enough miles in combat boots to appreciate the physiological boons to exercise in real life. But in game, when my stamina bar blinked warnings as it dropped too low and forced me to rest, they were spelled out. I lowered the travois to the ground a few hundred yards from the meadow and stood panting with my hands clutching my knees, hoping there wouldn't be some random roll against tweaking my back while hauling pork. I crossed my fingers in superstitious dread anyway. I covered the load with scrub, not that it would keep scavengers away from my catch, but I worked with what I had. Your concealment skill has reached rank 6. That was interesting, considering I wasn't concealing myself but the hogs. Wild. I decided it would do me good to pay attention to every skill point earned and how I earned it. Although I had doubts coyotes would find Ashley much of a deterrent, I asked her to patrol while I rested. The bloody scent of the meat might scare other hogs away. Pine was pungent, so I aimed for evergreen boughs with each stop my lungs mandated. Same plan? She asked, as I crept toward the place where she indicated a nest in a thicket by a stand of oak trees. There are sucklings, 4 of them, and the mother. Yes, I'll draw out the mother. Chase the sucklings off so I don't trip over them. She nodded. In hopes the ruckus would aid Ashley's task to scare off the little ones, I stomped toward the thicket, kicking at the brush and making enough of a racket to wake sleeping vampires. I suspected the hog would hold fast to the nest, intending to defend her young. She came barreling out, huffing and squealing, head low as she targeted me. Behind her, that lavender glow zipped into the thicket as Ashley swooped in. Feral hog attacks. Muttering at myself, I dismissed the notifications again and set my feet to accommodate my center of gravity. The hog matron charged, but I spun aside, swiping and then slicing at her haunches as she passed. The hog yelped as she whipped around in a tight turn that nearly jerked the knife from my hand, but I clutched it so tight the tendons in my arm bulged. Then the damn thing lowered her hard noggin, charged, and threw her body weight into my legs. I thumped down on my knees, then quickly rolled onto my backside. Her eyes level with mine, she grunted. When she twitched, I curled my legs beneath me, then hopped to my feet. She lowered her head for another sweep, but I dodged to one side, then brought the knife down. I was tired of fucking around. I stabbed for her neck, but she pulled back and my blade raked down her face, bisecting her eye. Blood and clear fluid streamed down her cheek as she flung her head about in pain and agitation. I sidestepped toward her blind side as we circled one another. Time to use my size as an advantage. Slicing such thick skin wasn't going to open her veins, so I darted in and out, jabbing the point of the weapon toward her neck. One puncture made her squeal. The second made her grumble. Red numbers flashed, then floated. Blood flowed. The hog opened her mouth and roared a sound that should never have come from a swine. Feral hog is enraged. Although I winced, I held fast, unwilling to let her drive me back. I jabbed, I stabbed, then my dagger struck an artery. Blood spouted like lava from a volcano after a few days' activity. She lunged, I danced, red numbers floated. Your blade skill has reached rank 8. Her front legs gave out. She tipped onto her front half, her blood painting the pine needles below. My breath wheezed in my chest, and my thighs groaned at me for making them haul pigs through the woods. God damn, I needed to work out more. Get those stats up. Despite her prone state, she turned her head and snapped the air between us. But I remained in my fighting stance, knees slightly bent, waiting her out. When she eventually stopped panting, I ventured close to nudge her with the toe of my boot. She twitched once, making me jump back and stumble on the uneven ground. Nice move, genius. I turned on my notifications with a thought so I could enjoy the coming announcement. You have defeated a feral hog. Plus 99 XP. It occurred to me that a feral hog would actually be one that escaped captivity and bred in the wild. Maybe someday I'd nitpick that with the pimp lawyer, but I had better use for my brain space in the moment. And my interface proved it. Congratulations, you have reached level 6. Whatever I'd done to level so fast, I'd take it. But upon a moment's reflection while I recovered, there was no time like the present to learn how. Parchment representing my combat log swept to the center of my vision. It turned out all the Discovery XP announcements I'd squelched really added up. Discovering what the game called the Shady Thicket netted 100 XP, the Green Grove, 95 XP. I'd made 3 more significant discoveries just dragging the travois, then the last hog topped off my XP bar. Pure gold. An irritated flip of my hand dismissed the messages while I bent to catch my breath, hands planted on my knees. I addressed my new ally as I huffed. I considered grabbing the babies from the nest, but if Ashley Rainsong didn't eat flesh, she might not smile on me slitting baby hog throats. Sure, the coyotes might eventually come for them, but if I had my druthers, we'd be long gone by then. The die bounced along, adding to my scores. I paused to review my stats, pleased to see some real progress. Not to mention, it was a legitimate reason to just stand there staring into space for a minute while my stamina recovered. There was that. Ronaldo Cobb Halfling level 6. You have not selected a class. Rank, nobody, you're a nobody. Brawn, 13, determination, 15, deceit, 10, intimidation, 9, logic, 16, movement speed, 12, persuasion, 9, recovery, 14, stamina, 10, vitality, 15, versatility, 11, professions, butchery, 2, carpentry, 3, action skills, concealment, 6, traits, survival, 3, intuition, 3, focus, 2, adaptation, 3, combat skills, blades, 10, knuckles, 2, sighing. I slit the hog's belly, then pulled the guts out into the grass. Reflective eyes gleamed from the edge of the trees, watching my every move, and I decided there was no time to rest if I wanted to keep my kills. I slung the bodies, sans organs, onto the heavily loaded travois, secured them, then got my bearings. Your butchery skill has reached rank 3. Your butchery skill has reached rank 4. Even with my stats increasing and the load balanced as best I could manage, the shit was heavy. Share your map and mark where you left the last hog and I'll guide you, the pixie said. I don't remember how to do that. I was exhausted, wiped out. Everything ached, and I couldn't wrangle my brain into remembering something so simple as sharing a map. Wow, you must be exhausted. Just bring it up, then make a swiping motion toward me. I followed her instructions, rolling my eyes at myself. No excuse for my depleted stamina to make me that stupid. She scanned the air for a moment, then nodded. No problem. No problem for you, maybe. I have to drag these fat bastards all the way home. Wee, all the way home, she sang, and I got a weird vision from a ghostly real-world reference I couldn't quite place. Something about my mother. Little piggies, maybe? My mom had passed during my last tour with Jack and Brenner overseas. The depression resulting from her death had been part of the reason I took the informant gig with the feds. With my family gone, I had nothing else to do unless I signed on for another tour, and I was over that shit. I bent at the knees to grasp the poles. Even lifting with my legs, I barely got the weight up, got myself straightened. My back twinged in protest, and I cursed. Holy fuck. Grind. Step by halting step, I hauled the load. My legs shook by the time we got to the hanging tree, as I'd come to think of it. If they had hernias and Mafioso online, each step was a new risk. But I cut down the last carcass and tied it atop the rest. My butchery skill ranked up to 5. Just when I raised the load to pull again, I got a new message. Your brawn attribute has reached rank 14. Your stamina attribute has reached rank 11. I knew by then to be grateful for each tiny blessing. All told, the little venture into the forest had proved fortuitous, and I was already wondering how long it'd be before the creatures proved too low in level to benefit me. A return trip, perhaps? I leaned in and pulled, the cords in my neck straining. The travois drudged up soil along deeper divots. We finally heaved the load onto the dirt path leading to the east gate. By the time we arrived, the sky behind grew pale, and the first morning birds stirred in the woods. Their happy songs? Not contagious. I wasn't in the mood for chipper and wished they'd shut the fuck up. I paused to fasten my shirt, tattered and bloody as it was, then waited until the guard finally cast a sleepy look in our direction from the walkway over the gate. "Whatcha want in town so early?" he called down from between the lights fixed up top. It seemed obvious to me, but I replied anyhow. "To return to it. Bringing in some meat for the cafe." Yeah, which one's that?" I sighed. "The Bluebell, for Tansy Bluebell." "All right." He called to someone, then the gate began its slide. "This is as far as I go," Ashley announced. "Not a fan of the city?" She gave her head a decisive shake. I didn't have time to discuss why that was. I doubted the guards would leave the gate open while we had a chat. Plus, I was too damn tired to argue. At the same time, I didn't want to lose my ally. Ashley presented a solution like she'd read my thoughts. "Add me to your friends list. If you come into these woods again, you should be close enough to reach me." "Okay, I will. Thanks again, Ashley." Her name popped onto the list above Tansy's, and I gave her another little fist bump before heaving the poles and lurching my way through the gates. Leaving her left a bit of an ache in my chest, and I worried about Javier Jinx showing up again. Set aside the fact she could heal my wounds. Losing a friend and healer would be unnecessarily tragic, especially to just waste her on druggies. Maybe I could do something about the elf to ensure that never happened. But that wasn't the mission. I was in River City to get the goods on the crime family pinning me down in the outside world, to get the feds off my back, to attain some semblance of a freedom I hadn't enjoyed in way too long. I had to keep trudging forward, literally. After her experience with Jinx's net, Ashley would be on high alert for any other scavengers. But a recollection pricked at my brain as I dragged ass up the road. The halfling mentor had said that elves despised the drug trade. So why in the world would one be out in the woods harvesting the glittering hallucinogen? Maybe that was Jinx's whole scheme. If the elves maintained domiciles in nature outside the city, perhaps the pixies had observed them enough they didn't consider them threats. Javier could use that to his advantage, to get close. I let the thoughts roll through my mind as I trudged along, kept my brain off the pain wailing in my spine, the protests of my sore thighs, the aching muscles in my arms. This early, the streetlights were still on, casting yellow halos on the streets and walkways. To call the foot traffic light would have been the grandest of understatements, but I did spy the occasional halfling lugging boxes on a cart, orcs carrying barrels into an alley. My stamina bar blinked. Jesus, had it been this far on the way to the gate? It seemed like 100 miles. I eyed horses and carts with a pile of jealousy. My muscles ached much worse than the bruises I hadn't asked the pixie to heal. My thighs screamed bloody murder. The cobblestones caught the dragging ends of the poles, and the sudden resistance nearly jerked me off my feet several times along the way. I was rewarded for my perseverance. Your brawn attribute has increased to rank 15. Your stamina attribute has increased to rank 12. I passed a pony tied outside an apartment building, and exhaustion left me contemplating how I might go about hitching it to my travois. Just a loner. I'd return it, I swore to myself. But even if I dared, I'd spent the last of Tansy's rope tying down the hog matron's body, and the equine's riding tack wasn't suitable for fastening to the poles. The hitching posts were for short-term parking anyhow, and I didn't want to get caught borrowing free muscle. I kept pulling. The bluebell appeared closed when I arrived, but when I cupped my hands against the window to peer inside, a hint of light streamed out of the kitchen. Praying to whatever God existed in the virtual world that someone was doing prep work, I banged on the front door. Moments later, Tansy's father peered through the pass-through window behind the counter, cocked his head to the side, then tossed down a rag. He emerged through the door just enough to point with a butcher knife toward the side and around the back in a sweeping motion. I would have paid him both bucks in my bag to help me drag it that last little bit. I might have been in a fantasy world, but fantasies wouldn't serve me. He met me at what I first mistook for an alley gateway, but turned out to be the entry to a wee private courtyard. I thanked the morning sun when he helped me haul the load through the back and into a chilly storeroom. "You did good, boy," he mumbled, taking stock of the delivery. "Fast, too." He clutched his hips as he eyed the load. "You know, I thought for sure you'd camp for a day to get all this. Let me fill your belly for a couple weeks at least, while you get on your feet. What do you say to that?" Mr. Bluebell stuck out his hand and I shook it. "Bonus." "Thank you, sir. I do appreciate it." A bubble popped up, and I nearly swooned with relief. "You have completed a quest. Bring home the bacon. Go into the eastern forest and hunt feral hogs. Objectives: retrieve 10 feral hog flanks. Complete. Retrieve 5 feral hog heads. Complete. Retrieve 20 feral hog feet. Complete. Rewards: 150 bucks, 12050 XP. Bonus for completion time. 2 free meals per day for 14 days. Another bubble popped up. Its frame flashed gold, and ethereal music filled my ears. "Congratulations! You have reached level 7. I didn't get a chance to review my new stats after the die rolled across my view because Mr. Bluebell was talking to me, and it was hard enough to focus when I was that bone-tired. Relieved of their workout duties, my muscles began cramping. "You hungry?" I was famished, but shook my head. What I could really use is somewhere to lie down. It's been a long night. At that point, I'd have pulled up a cold piece of floor to sleep on. I had my eye on a cot in the corner of the storeroom, but Mr. Bluebell led me out to the small courtyard behind the cafe and pointed to an outdoor set of stairs leading up to an apartment over the restaurant. "Just head up there. Tansy can show you to the shower in the spare room, kiddo. You look like you could use a good rest." He patted me on the back, squeezed my shoulder, then retreated into the storeroom.